In today's episode of HR Visionaries, we talk to Angela from Harvard Business Publishing. We talk about a super interesting case study they have conducted to reduce the stress around AI and see the opportunities. It's super interesting. Stay tuned. Welcome to HR Visionaries, where we unlock the secrets of modern HR. I'm Benjamin, your host. Join us as we shed light on today's HR universe with HR leaders and innovators from across the globe. Whether you're an HR pro, a business leader, or just curious about the future of work, this is your shortcut to the forefront of HR innovation. Brought to you by Hire, the AI talent attraction platform. Welcome to the latest episode of HR Visionaries. I'm very much looking forward to my guest today. Angela, it's great to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me, Benjamin.
Angela, can you tell us a bit about yourself? Who are you?
Who am I? Such an existential question. I am a 30-year career HR professional. I studied it in the university and was so taken in by the curriculum that I have never looked back. I married my college sweetheart, with whom I have two wonderful adult humans. They are living wonderful lives of meaning and significance. And, I feel very strongly about the work that I'm doing now, both professionally and personally. And it all leads back to, I think, really finding meaning in helping others.
That's a wonderful thing to say. And it's indeed remarkable. You said that, you have studied HR, you have been in HR for 30 years. Why?
Yeah, I find the work incredibly gratifying, frustrating, challenging, impactful, all at the same time. And I think one of the really neat things that they don't tell you until you're actually in practice is that you get to wear so many hats in the best way possible, right? And some days I get to be barrister, other days I get to be therapist, sometimes I get to be strategist, sometimes I get to be executioner. So you get to play lots of different roles and use different parts of your brain that I'm not sure get exercised as much in other functions. So I really appreciate the versatility. It does mean that it carries a level of unpredictability that can often be maddening. It can completely blow up your day when an employee shows up, at your door and says, I really have a challenge I need assistance with. But it comes with the territory. You set things aside and you make that person who's sitting in front of you the most important thing in the day, that moment.
Well, you just said that it can be very frustrating and can be very gratifying, but in particular, when you are heavily invested yourself, when you feel very strongly about what you're doing, and then let's say you're a salesperson, you could always say, well, there are other people I can sell to. However, if there is an employee sitting in front of you, there is no way that you are allowed to screw up.
Yes. And in the cases where you do, because of course it does happen, the easiest way to rectify that is simply to say, I'm sorry. And I should have done better. I should have shown up as a better version of myself. And I hope you'll allow me the grace to try again.
How do you deal with that margin? Well, that very little margin of error, so that, you can't, that it must not happen very often, right? So this is something that is very important for you personally, for you as an organization, that people feel treated well, people feel at home, and that's quite a bit of pressure.
It is. And certainly in my career, I have made missteps where it has damaged my credibility and trust with the other person. And it takes a very long time to rebuild that, which is why I think those of us in this discipline take such great care not to make mistakes, because, as you say, the margin of error is pretty slim. And it's all a matter of whether or not the person will trust you again or not. It's not the matter of will they buy a product from you, will they come back to listen to you talk at a conference. It's about really whether or not they will entrust you with some of the most challenging issues in their life, right? In the context of work, and sometimes in the context of in their life, for sure. So yes, it is a responsibility that I think we all take very seriously.
You just said, well, it's important to say sorry.
Mm.
I think for many people, this is quite a big step to say sorry because, well, we are all trained in a way that, well, we shouldn't apologize too much. But I do agree with you. It's so important to sometimes say sorry. But how do you enable yourself and your team members to be in a position to be empowered to say sorry?
Role modeling it is really important. It is certainly a hallmark now of contemporary leadership, that vulnerability that we talk about, the transparency. And so when we make mistakes, other people see it far more quickly sometimes than we do ourselves. And so to pretend that has not happened is really just folly. And I think it only makes the situation worse. And being self-aware enough to say, you know what, that one's on me, is the first step to rebuilding trust and remaking that relationship. So I have not found it difficult to say when I've needed to say it. It has been difficult only to process that I made a grave error, but getting to sorry is a pretty short path because it's the quickest way to recover.
Well, perhaps you know this internet meme of Star Wars's C3PO that always apologizes all the time. How can you make sure that one doesn't overdo things in terms of apologizing, over apologizing, however, of course, not appearing cold and apologizing not often enough and not saying sorry too often?
I think that is a little bit where the 30 years of experience has certainly come into play, right? You learn to read the room, you develop your emotional intelligence, your emotional quotient to know when it's appropriate so that you don't overuse it. Constantly finding excuses for why things went wrong also doesn't play well. So that is important. Interestingly, just earlier today, I had a conversation with a manager who had a question for me about one of our people practices. And the answer wasn't a feel-good answer, but it was the truth. It was the right answer. And what the manager and I agreed on was that when we acknowledge that our employees are smart, when we respect their intellect, and we assume with the best grace that they can handle the truth, I think we go a long way in establishing ourselves as peers that can respect one another and can have the right kinds of conversations. Even if we don't see eye to eye, at least there's an appreciation for, you have a perspective, I have a perspective. Let's talk about this like mature professionals that we are. And even though the answer might not always be satisfactory, at least there is satisfaction in knowing that the exchange was handled well and with respect.
Well, that requires a lot of courage to be open, to be transparent, and to be honest, in particular in difficult situation, not sugarcoating anything.
I think it's far worse to be found out that you glossed over what was, a difficult truth, to be caught up to people like, why didn't you just say what was the right thing in the first place, right? That goes to our credibility as professionals. So I find it much easier just to save all that time and get right to it, because for the most part, I think employees intuit what the truth is anyway, and they're just waiting to see if that's actually what we will do.
You mentioned that, well, 30 years of experience helped to develop emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
That is most likely correct. However, for those who have not a wealth of 30 years of experience, how do you develop emotional intelligence? So perhaps you can share some examples. How do you coach people on your team, for example, to develop emotional intelligence?
Feedback. Feedback is such a powerful gift, especially when it's in the moment or as soon after, so that the experience is fresh, so the memory is fresh, and you can go back and say, you know what, this is what I observed, and maybe I would have handled it this way, or you did that brilliantly, do more of that, right? And so to the extent that we can give each other the opportunity to really reflect and be introspective about how we've shown up in a room or with others, I think that's an opportunity we don't take advantage of enough. And if the feedback isn't forthcoming, then ask for it. How did I do? What could I have done differently? Did that land well? Do you think my message went over as intended? Ask all those questions, because as people learn that you actually take that feedback with the positive intent it's given, they will learn to give it to you because they know that you will appreciate it.
When looking back 30 years ago, how were things back then? So were people open for feedback?
I think it depended more on the person. Again, I mentioned contemporary leadership, which has certainly evolved a lot in the past 3 decades, right? Where it is more about vulnerability and transparency and meeting employees where they are. Whereas 30 years ago, hierarchy was very much respected, and you didn't just march up to the CEO and demand an explanation for how things were done, right? I want to know how the sausage is made, right? I mean, it was a very, very different times, and we've approached an equilibrium between the employee and the employer that did not exist 30 years ago. And so I think because we're closer in together, because the expectations from the employer are so much greater for information, for insights into the decision making, that leaders can respond best when they are emotionally intelligent and when they are present and when they're engaged and when they actually are sincere in getting in closer to the organization and hearing what's going on. So much has changed, and I think HR hopefully has played a part in advancing that style of leadership in organizations. For my part, I think I've always tried to lead that way. It's nice to see the rest of the world catching up to it.
Well, indeed, and when looking at managers, well, let's say you have some line managers on the business side. Um, Many of them, well, are promoted based on, well, performance with regards to sales execution, with regards to, well, in an engineering department, whether you're a very good engineer. And then very often companies, well, then look for men, or wonder why people, well, who are brilliant engineers might not be great managers. And I think their HR needs to step in to provide counsel in these situations.
Yes, we certainly have a history of promoting people to their, to their most level of incompetence, right? We take someone who's good in one thing and naturally assume that they can then suddenly be good leaders. And it takes a completely different, not completely, but it requires a new skill set to be a good leader. And in fact, when we talk about career ladders and advancement and internal mobility at Harvard Business Publishing, we talk about how that new skill set of leadership becomes more weighty, becomes more important than the technical skill set. Because our belief is that if you are a good leader, then you will unleash the technical expertise of the people on your team so that you don't have to know everything. You don't have to be the subject matter expert. But what you can do is motivate them and inspire them and give them the feedback and help them to manage expectations so that the whole team does better.
Well, it's I think it's indeed important that organizations recognize this, that organizations understand that, well, subject matter experts may not be good managers. However, when you are promoted through the roof, you may not be very open for ideas from people that are not subject matter experts as you are. How do you make sure that you're heard nevertheless?
That's a really wonderful question, because I find in HR in particular, there are a number of people who feel like they have a point of view, that they have an expertise in building culture. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily true. There is art, but there is certainly science to what organizations need to build strong cultures. And so I often find that people are like, well, we should do it this way and we should do it that way. And I often find myself thinking, well, I don't tell you how to balance the books. And so I won't pretend to know how to do a marketing launch. And so I would implore you to follow some of the best practices that we have discovered over years and years of organizational behavior and psychology to know what makes for good cultures. So it is part of the influence that HR needs to bring, right? We influence the organization not because people report to us, but because we are thoughtful, we use data to drive decisions, because there is science that's backed behind good HR. and just having conversations with the business and always linking the HR strategy to the business strategy has been my most successful formula for making sure that I am heard.
Well, that is now we're going back basically to the different roles you mentioned, and I also had the question just written down. What kind of role, what kind of head do you like most in your position?
What kind of hat do I like the most? Oh, that's a good question.
Is it the barrister? Is it the
I do like
therapist?
the barrister. I do like delving into the law and understanding the nuances and the gray shades where we play, because it's not black and white. There are so many nuances to the law. So I do enjoy that. But I think what I like the most is actually just sort of the basic employee relations. When an employee has a challenge and I'm able to help support them through or help them think through what is a solution, to give them coaching, to give them confidence, to give them counsel so that they can then go make a better decision that suits them best. I really enjoy that one-on-one time. And it is very gratifying when someone comes back and says, "Thank you, Angela, that was really helpful." I know it's a very slow way to make an impact in an organization, right? Because you typically don't have the chief HR officer meeting with each and every single one an employee. I will say, Benjamin, that I'm aware that my brand of HR is pretty particular. I think I'm much better in small to medium-sized businesses. I don't know how my colleagues in organizations with hundreds of thousands do it. I like the intimate setting because I think for me that is where the joy of the work really comes.
Well, the intimate setting, perhaps you can tell us a bit about you as an organization, because it's probably one of the strongest brand names on the globe. However, people perhaps don't know what's actually behind it.
So Harvard Business Publishing is only 600 employees, so I feel like our footprint is bigger than we actually are. We're headquartered in Massachusetts in the United States, but we do have a presence in about a dozen other countries. Our next largest presence is in India, so that helps us cover sort of that side of the globe and that time zone. And we have three arms of the business. The best well-known is the magazine and the books, the press side of the business, but we also have the education arm, which helps to distribute case studies that are published by Harvard Business School professors, as well as business professors from other elite institutions like the London School of Economics or INSEAD, as an example. And then the third arm is a professional services arm where we co-create content and leadership programming for the Global 2000 so that they could advance their leadership development.
Well, it's certainly a very, very strong brand name. How much does this help when you approach people who might potentially want to work for you?
It's a little bit of a double-edged sword, I will say. I think when people hear Harvard,
it might also be a bit scary, right? So scare people away.
Yes, there's a lot of gravitas, right, that comes with the Harvard brand, right? It is symbolic of exclusivity, of excellence, right? And so there is that. And then also it sounds like academia. It doesn't sound like it would necessarily be on the cutting edge of product development or of technology when the fact is we are also sort of an educational technology company. We deploy lots of digital solutions for our clients and our customers. And, HBR is digital, and we have lots of digital products that support that suite of tools. And so it can be a little bit of a sell job, but I think once people give us a moment to explain all the work that we do, and importantly, the impact we bring on the world, most people are pretty much quickly sold on our mission.
Okay, now you have to tell us.
So we believe we unlock the leader in everyone. We think that everybody has a leader inside waiting to be unleashed or to be further developed. And so our hope is that we are a premier destination where people want to take research and bring it to applications so that as soon as they're done reading an article or a content or they've gone through one of our programs, they can immediately apply what they've learned so they can be a better leader.
Can you tell us one of the best or night? I do that again. Can you tell us some of the most interesting stories that had perhaps the most amazing impact on people's life that you've heard?
Impact on people's lives. Actually, the woman who heads up our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts told me about a young Black male professional, and he was really struggling to connect with his manager, who I don't believe was a person of color. And he was speaking with her, and he read one of our articles about how to manage your relationship with your boss. And he immediately applied that. And now, fast forward, he is a very successful business person. And he said that article was the turning point for him in helping to see himself differently, to view the relationship differently, and to immediately think differently about how he could nurture that relationship. So that is one of the more heartwarming stories that I'm aware of. But certainly there are countless instances where people have taken our solutions, our 5-step process, and immediately seen an impact in their organization. But I am particularly fond of that story.
It's an amazing story. Perhaps we can find that article and link it below. It's but it's indeed true. So sometimes those those ideas that are communicated in articles can be so powerful and so life-changing. It's almost scary how important some pieces of work can be.
Yes, agreed. And I think that is what's so meaningful about working here, is that we really do believe that we can help change people's professional lives, and perhaps there's something they can carry over into their personal lives as well.
Indeed, and Angela, I'm very curious to learn what do you think about the future of HR? You have been around for 30 years, you mentioned. So last 30 years, and perhaps looking into the future, 30 years is perhaps a bit of a challenge, but let's say if we can look at the next 5 years, perhaps.
The next 5 years, I think that HR will continue to be a strategic partner for the business. I think in particular, right now, this moment in time, we have an obligation to help organizations understand the impact of Gen AI and this new technology. It is absolutely changing the face of work and how it's getting done. And we should help our organizations embrace that technology and not be fearful of it. In fact, I was recently talking to our customer service team. And as you've probably heard, customer service is one of those roles that is ripe for automation. And what we talked about, how it was an enabling technology, it wasn't a replacement technology, and the opportunities it gives to people in those roles to do higher order thinking, to deliver extraordinary value to the customers and clients who call in to that center with questions and concerns about their experience with our brand. And I think that's the perspective that we should all take, that we shouldn't be scared of the technology. I think the more fearful we are, the more likely our worst nightmares about the technology will happen. As I have repeated, and I have heard other people say, is that AI won't take our jobs, but people who do use AI and use it well will be the ones who take our jobs. And I believe that to be true. If I were to look 30 years out, though, Benjamin, I would love to see a future where HR isn't actually a function, that actually every people leader assumes responsibility for culture and for managing performance and for building psychological safety in the organization, and that they know how to identify, recruit, and develop the very, very best talent so that you don't need a specific function to make sure those things happen. Now, I recognize that threatens job security for everybody who's in this function. I don't know whether or not will actually come to pass, but that would be my ideal, is that culture and enabling the best performance of all of our employees is the job of everyone and not one particular function.
If you allow me, I might want to take this to perhaps a bit philosophical level. So I do also believe that, humans and AI working hand in hand is a great opportunity. And also when looking at AI, liberating people from not meaningless work. That sounds a bit degrading, but perhaps like very repetitive work that also is, I think, has a very negative impact on people's creativity. So if we liberate through AI people from repetitive tasks, we can enable them to be much more free in their mind and to rise to completely different levels. And therefore, and now I come to my point, and therefore, when we liberate people to be more creative, their value for the organization will increase tremendously, obviously, and therefore the role of HR will also increase in its importance, because those people who work for an organization can't be replaced easily because, well, they do repetitive tasks, so it can be taught quickly, but they will be very specialized, and therefore the importance of HR increases, well, increases over the years by a significant extent, in my belief.
Yeah, I believe that is absolutely one path that this could take, right? That would certainly warm my heart if that were the case. And again, I don't see the technology as a threat, but as an enabling tool. And we should teach our employees how to use it well.
When talking about this, so how do you you make sure that people are not or don't feel threatened, don't don't have any negative emotions towards new technology that's implemented? I totally hear what you're saying, but it's perhaps a much more difficult tasks to be executed.
So I have been working hand in hand with our head of IT and our head of product development to develop a Gen AI enablement program. And over the last several months, we've had workshops to teach people how to use Copilot. We're on the Microsoft environment, so how to use Copilot, how to do some basic prompt engineering, to take a fundamentals course just to understand what Gen AI is. And we're going to be following up with learning days. And our plan with the learning days is to make using technology fun. So actually 40 of us just recently went through an executive education course at Harvard Business School. And one of the courses was on Gen AI. And we went through an hour-long workshop where we had to stand up an imaginary snack food company. And we had to do market research, we had to do the packaging, we had to do the product development, we had to do the marketing launch, and if we had time to come up with a commercial, a jingle, all using Gen AI and ChatGPT. And it demystified the technology so much, and at the same time showed us how mind-blowingly capable this tool can be. So I am not a marketer. And in the course of an hour, we developed a new chocolate candy, came up with the name, came up with beautiful packaging and a launch program in an hour. So imagine if you were actually a marketing professional, what more you could do. And I think the fact that it was this exercise that was meant to be fun really helped us get our hands dirty with it. So we will be replicating that with our population. We will take them through a simulation very similar to that, which will be followed up by a workshop that teaches them how to be better prompt engineers and apply that to their jobs in particular. So not building a snack company, but now how do they do that in their jobs? And then the third workshop will be a hackathon. And we will probably start with a product hackathon. And we're going to talk about how Gen AI will influence the products we may bring to market in the future. But we'll also do maybe hackathons and potential partnerships and how we'll be using technology to do that. So our intent is to give people the tool to use in contexts that are not threatening, and then slowly introduce those to their work. Our goal at the end of our fiscal year is to have every person recover at least 4 hours worth of time because they've automated tasks that can be automated.
So it would be 4 hours overall?
Each week.
Okay, right.
I'm sorry, I should have meant an important measure. 4 hours each week for each employee.
Indeed, so around 10-ish%.
Yes, yes.
Okay, cool. And I love the idea with the candy company. So I'm just wondering what kind of candy I would work on. But it's an amazing idea also for those who don't have the opportunity to join executive courses at Harvard Business School. That's actually an amazing case study that our listeners can perhaps recreate and execute in their own company. Indeed.
Yes. Yes.
Angela, I do have one last question indeed. So you've been around for 30 years, and over the time, what have been the most productive interview questions you have asked people that you think will tell you most about a new joiner, let's say for your team or for your organization?
So it's actually not the first question I would ask or the second question I would ask. It's when I ask for the third example of when someone has done something. So we all know that everybody comes to the interview equipped with all their stories ready to go. That's great. I'm glad to hear that story. Tell me about another time when you also did that. Fantastic. Tell me about another time. And usually when you ask for the third example, they really have to dig into their catalog, but that's when you can really test whether or not they're proficient in the skill or not. So for example, when you're interviewing someone in customer service, they're going to be doing that 100 times a day. So they should come to you with probably hundreds of thousands of examples, and they should be able to retrieve moments when they've delighted the customer on the other end. If they're scrambling to come up with one, then you may want to take another look and determine whether or not that candidate is really the best one in front of you.
Angela, I really understand now very well why you mentioned the barrister before, is because it's like a cross-examination then in that situation.
I do it in the nicest way possible, Benjamin.
Lovely. Angela, thank you so much. It was really cool talking to you. I think it was very, very insightful, and I really love the real life examples that people can apply in their own organization. Thank you so much. Great, many thanks.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks a lot, and well, thanks a lot for listening in, and see you next time.